Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Colony Drop, a Gundam podcast. My name is Brian.
And my name is Isaac. This is your favorite Gundam podcast where we talk about everything from Gundam music, lore, mobile suits, gunpla, concepts of our own, characters, top fives, lowest fives, or bottom fives, I should say. We talk about everything, Brian.
That's right, Isaac. And Isaac, this will not be the first podcast that comes out in 2023.
Oh.
It is the first one that we are recording in 2023. So I got to ask, Isaac, did you get any Gundam Christmas presents or anything of the sort?
In a way, Brian, yes. Yes, I did. I got a gift for myself. And you know what it is?
Oh, my. No, what is it?
It's called Gundam Evolution.
Isn't that free?
It costs time. We'll put it that way.
Listeners, you too can get Gundam Evolution for yourself.
A system able to run it. That's what it costs. But
okay.
But yeah, that's what I got, and I enjoy it. My only gripe though is that the only Dom you can use in the whole game, it's a Dom Trooper from Gundam Seed Destiny, which is half an atrocity.
Yeah, subpar.
Yeah.
Yeah, so listeners, there's been a few of you out there who have asked us to do a Gundam Evolution episode. So I think that will be forthcoming shortly.
Yeah.
Because Isaac, he persuaded me to play as well. So
yeah, circling back to you, Brian, did you get any juicy Gundam gifts?
I actually did. I got one of my, I don't want to call it holy grails, but there's certain master grades where I'm like, I really want one of those one day, but they're really hard to find. And the master grade I got was one of the full armor RX-78 Gundams, the FA-78-1, which is not the one from Thunderbolt, which is the one everyone likes. This is the older one, but I still think it looks cool. But the reason I like it is it was in a few of the chapters of the Mobile Suit Gundam 0079 manga adaptation that came out, at least partially, in the United States. And I bought it way back when, in whatever it was, Isaac, 2002. It's a cool throwback to that, have fond memories of reading that manga back in the day. And that suit's not featured in a lot of stuff. So I got that one. It's a pretty rare master grade. You don't see it too often that much anymore, and they don't seem to want to reprint it. So one day I'll paint it up just like it was in the manga. So that was my Gundam Christmas right there.
Wow, that's a pretty sweet gift, Brian.
Yeah, I asked for it and in our gift exchange, and I got it. So
you're on the nice list.
Yeah, Santa liked me this year. So
Santa came through. He's not real, but he came through.
Yeah, so hopefully, listeners, you all had a great holiday season, and you're back and ready for some more Gundam in 2023. Specifically, Isaac, coming up, we're going to have to review Witch from Mercury. It's finished its first half. I think its second half starts airing in April, so we'll be reviewing that soon too.
Brian, are you saying that I'm going to have to watch something that's subbed?
Yeah, I think so, Isaac. 'Cause I don't know when the dub's coming out. So
all right, I'll do it for the listeners. I'll do it.
Well, you're currently watching something subbed that I think is a bit of a slog. So it's a lot of subs for you.
Yeah,
I understand.
It is quite the slog, isn't it, Brian? But we'll talk about that when it's time to talk about that.
All right. So what are we talking about today, Isaac?
Today we're going to talk about concepts, ideas, and, well, when you get right down to it, kind of a solution. We're talking about alternatives to what could only be called space fascism, which is 9 out of 10 times the same repetitive enemy that is fought in Gundam. Right, Brian?
That's fair. And, listeners, can you believe it? One day, Isaac was texting me, and, all of a sudden, he was tired of space fascism. And I never thought that I would hear that out of Isaac's mouth, because he's usually our resident space fascist holdout. And he was like, something must be done about this, Brian. What can we do? And so I think we're going to pitch some ideas today, Isaac, right, about where could we go that's not space fascism for your antagonist?
Yeah, and this really comes down to, like Brian just said, the repetition. I mean, as great it is that we're changing so much in Gundam, including the gender of the pilots, the setting, other stuff like that, it's also important that I think we change the type of people that are the villains. It's just very repetitive, very often. For the life of me, I still don't understand why all the sides still keep going back to that same well and drawing water. After a certain point, some leaders in each side have to kind of put their hands up and say, look, this isn't working. We need a different way to do things.
Yeah, you think they would like learn from recent history, right? It's not even that long ago when this stuff repeats itself. So
yeah, say what you will about like the various countries and political systems in our own world's history, but like once something was done and clearly didn't work out or clearly was like evil, they didn't do it again. Right? They moved on. Everybody moves on. So this is about, just spicing up the type of villains that we fight. And I decided to put on my big thinking cap and think of, well, okay, if some alternate universe or distant UC series was about to come out, and for sure we were told, okay, the villains aren't going to be, your run-of-the-mill space fascists, who would they be? What are some kind of real-life examples we could draw from to make new types of Gundam villains? And one of them, Brian, that I thought of was a new type cult / religious zealots.
Ooh.
Yeah.
I like that. We don't have a lot of that, right? I mean, I guess we sort of had like the Moon colony from Double Zeta, and I guess it's in Moon Gundam, but that's not a full-on enemy faction, really. That they're not really the antagonists. So, yeah, I don't think we really have a religious component.
Yeah, exactly. And I know Witch from Mercury's out now, and clearly in the prologue, Brian and I remember that the villain's cathedral, clearly a religious name, did mention, some quasi-religious talk about the hammer of witches, and so maybe there's going to be a religious current, at least in the villain side, in The Witch from Mercury. We don't know. We still have to watch it. But if you remember, Brian, in Gundam X, there was a new type cult in the colonies, but it was so barely glimpsed because of how quickly that series went and how short of a time they were in the colonies that we know next to nothing about it.
I actually don't remember that, but it's also been about 20 years since I watched the show, so
yeah,
that kind of makes sense that I don't remember.
Well, yeah, okay, so the bad guys in that, they kind of believe new types were like, the next evolution, but they were much more culty about it than just, a couple of Xeon guys.
More culty rather than philosophizing.
Right, exactly. But anyways, I believe that, a fanatical group could be a great choice as a villain in a Gundam series where they just believe new types are just, deified almost, where they maybe worship a red comet in the past, for example. That's one of their gods, or something that they a legendary hero they look up to for like revenge or something,
Yeah.
Maybe they believe the new types are so close to the next evolution of humanity, or so close to the gods of the past or something, that becoming a cyber new type's mandatory. Whether you make it through it or not, or there's side effects or not, you have to go through with it. So they have a very outsized cyber new type force, and drawing a lot from our own world, especially recent history. We've seen how violent and dangerous religious factions can be, religious zealots can be, when they take their beliefs and use violence to force their beliefs on other people.
Absolutely. I mean, that's actually a pretty relevant topic for today's world. Do you envision these zealots forcibly making people undergo the cyber new type process, or are they not that advanced technologically?
I can see that happening. At the same time, though, I can also see wherever there's a Gundam story that's involving Earth, the sanctity of Earth is always playing a role. So either maybe they'll think everyone on Earth should be turned into new types also, or maybe they'll think, I don't know, by default of being on Earth, they should never be a new type. So
yeah.
Difficult to say, but we've dealt so much the last 2 decades at least fighting a religious enemy. So why wouldn't there be one in Gundam that follows the same tactics and is just as brutal and evil?
Do you envision them being led by an actual new type, or do they not have any new types sort of in their ranks, and this is purely just a worship game?
I can see them being led by, maybe a mix. Because like any kind of evil group, there's always the hypocrites in it, right? That are maybe not technically in the in-group, but they'll just use it to gain power, as usual.
Yeah, I don't think it's a real cult unless you got a healthy amount of hypocrisy in there, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Especially at the top.
And speaking of hypocrisy, you could have the same group or maybe a different one believe that, some people's souls are way down gravity. So maybe that's kind of an authorization to do horrible things to them or commit various atrocities. There's so many sort of seeds, no pun intended, oh boy, planted by things people have said in the past, in previous content and series and movies, that you could sort of water those, I think, and they grow. The ideas that they kind of denote shows what people in the Earth sphere think in the universal century, you know? Why wouldn't they grow over time into something people fight for?
Do you see this fitting into the UC in particular at any point in time, or is this like in the UC distant future, like the 300s?
I feel like if it was UC, they'd have to reconquista it, where like it's it's so into the future where they were like, yeah, we kind of stopped with the universal century timeline. We remember that stuff, but you know, we call ourselves a different time period now.
That was the thought I was getting when you said they worship the Red Comet, because it seems like they vaguely know who he is, but it's a bit faint. They don't know exactly, perhaps, what happened. Just the legend of the Red Comet is maybe what they know.
Yeah, or the Gundam itself is like religious to them, a unicorn. You know, there's so many different things you could do with this, and I feel like viewers would be like, oh, okay, yeah, we definitely understand an enemy faction like this, because they're, you know, we have religious nuts in our world, and they cause a huge amount of problems. so
Well, that makes sense. I like it. I think it would do well.
What about you? Say your faction.
All right, so
oh boy.
My first one, I have between 3 and 5, depending on how you count these. So the first one is a bit of a cheat, Isaac, because it already exists. I just want to remind people that it exists, but it's not being used, and I think it's a crime. So I'm calling this the Machines. So this is the mobile armors from Iron-Blooded Orphans.
Oh.
Isaac, I think these mobile armors are the most intriguing alternative opponent that has ever been teased, and Sunrise is letting it rot on the vine by not using it further.
Or letting it rot under the sand.
Oh, hey! They gave us a mobile phone game through Earther Hunt, it's only available in Japan, but instead of like a Calamity War film or OVA, I mean, I don't really even understand how that makes sense. And to remind everyone, if you haven't seen Iron-Blooded Orphans, I guess this is a bit of a spoiler, but I'm going to read a quick excerpt from the wiki to remind everyone what's going on here. So, a series of terrifying, colossal, non-humanoid mobile weapons larger than mobile suits. They're forbidden due to their sheer terror. They killed hundreds of millions and ruined civilization during the Calamity War. They're controlled by AI as a result of little to no programmed ethical conduct, and they're capable of unrestrained violence. Heavily employed during the Calamity War, the mobile armors self-evolved, becoming better, stronger, and gaining the ability to self-propagate. They were infamously known to have wiped out cities, and were ultimately responsible for wiping out a quarter of the world's population.
Wow.
They were eventually eradicated by the founder of Gjallarhorn, Agnika Kairu, and the ancestors of the Seven Stars. It is said that the mobile suits were developed to defeat them, and that they are essentially arch enemies. So, Isaac, the setup for this story is perfect. The situation sets up mobile suits themselves as the good guys. We can root for all mobile suits in this movie.
Yeah.
We have a legendary hero that we already wanted to know more about in Agnika Kairu. We got his name thrown about throughout the whole series, and we never even really saw the guy. And we get something new from the series, or the movie as well, in Gjallarhorn being the good guys. I just think it writes itself, and it's a shame that it's not being used. And the Machines as a concept, I think, are much better than Double O's aliens in terms of a non-human opponent that is grounded in the world in which it exists.
Yeah.
If you go to the non-human realm and you're choosing aliens, machines, and whatever else, or monsters or something, I think the machine one is perfect, and I don't understand why they're not using it. They teased us with this really intriguing thing, and then we didn't go there.
Right. Yeah.
So where is it, Isaac? Bring it to me.
Two things, Brian. Number one, the use of mobile armors in a non-UC series as like this AI menace from the past is just brilliant, right? Because some series don't even have mobile armors in them.
No.
And number two, the Calamity War sounds so epic. It is still such a pity we haven't seen it. Why haven't they done, Gundam Gjallarhorn or something like that, right? It would be awesome.
It would be great. I don't know.
You know what it reminds me of? Like, well, not to nerd out. Well, I'll just do it. Whatever. The Lord of the Rings, right? Before Sauron, there was an even worse guy called like Morgoth, and there was a huge war with like dragons and armies of Balrogs and all this. And, where's that movie? But this is the same thing. It's essentially a Skynet situation, and original Skynet like T1 and Terminator 2, it was really cool. So seeing the Machines come back as a faction in some Gundam series would be amazing. Yeah,
it's steeped in lore that you have this hint of, and if you're bringing up like other things that it reminds you of, it also actually reminds me a little bit of the Clone Wars from Star Wars. Now, when I say that, I mean like before the Clone Wars series was made, right? Like if you rewind the clock to like the 90s and you were watching Star Wars, or the 80s, And it was just kind of this thing you had to imagine in your mind. That's basically exactly what the Calamity War is, right? It's just we have a little bit of info on it, and it sounds really intriguing. And so maybe they're just worried that they don't want to screw it up, or they don't have a good enough, pitch for it or something. But I gotta think on like the 10-year anniversary of the show or something, Isaac. I really hope this thing shows up as a project.
Yeah, it'd be great. And if they're going back to draw water from the well that is Gundam Seed, God knows why. Why wouldn't they go to do Iron-Blooded Orphans too?
I hope so. That's my number one. It's a bit of a cheat because it already exists, and this is not original.
No,
but,
not at all.
I just want to remind everyone that that's out there and it's being wasted.
Brian,
as you can tell, I'm a little upset about it. But
Brian went off topic, but you know what? It still fits because it's barely under the umbrella, so we'll allow it.
Anyway, what do you got next for us, Isaac?
All right. Another cool faction to see brought back, done bigger and better and badder, would be like an aristocracy or a monarchy. We barely saw this in Crossbone and F91, but what was so weird about F91 was that they kind of told us that a few people were like aristocrats, but it still seemed so weird that no one was actually a king or anything like that. But I thought it'd be much more interesting if we fought a faction from, I don't know, Mars or something, or who knows, wherever, that was actually a full monarchy. They had a king, They had a bunch of lords, kind of common humans. But maybe a good twist would be the nobles were genetically enhanced so that they're, they kind of coordinated themselves, so to speak, where they do perform better in combat and piloting mobile suits or mobile armor. Since they're so much larger and more expensive, they're only reserved for the ruling class. When I told you about this, Brian, you used a good phrase of calling them noble armors.
I'm copywriting that, Sunrise. So
it's a different flavor, of course, than our usual space fascists or a bunch of new typism religious zealots. But it was cool seeing the Crossbone Vanguard, and it was cool seeing Gallahorn. And so far, well, I guess Ramafeller too, but so far they were the kind of closest we had to sort of an aristocracy monarchy type enemy.
Yeah, I've wondered about this. Do you think that maybe because F91 sort of crashed and burned a little bit, for lack of a better, do you think they're afraid to go back down that road?
Not really, because like Victory Gundam has a queen.
Yeah, that's fair.
I mean, she's such a minimally a queen. It's really, they're space fascists really that kind of have a queen in name only.
Yeah.
But it's difficult to say if that's exactly the reason. I'd say it was more just because F91 was such an almost copy and paste fast forwarded version of the original series and they didn't want to go back to something that was already kind of crash and burn in a way.
Yeah, I wonder how much more fun the Crossbone Vanguard would have been if we had got a 50 episode series. I mean, you would have. It seems like we were on a pace to learn a lot more about the Rona family than we were the Zabi family in the original.
Yeah, and I think with 50 episodes, a series could kind of really flesh out a faction that thinks, okay, we're born superior, we should rule. As opposed to, say what you will about the Zabis, taking their on noble title and becoming the rulers. But for them, up until Giran at the end, it really wasn't, okay, we were born to rule. It was more to just opportunistically seize power.
I like the King of Mars idea. I mean, or didn't people call Orga King of Mars during Iron-Blooded Orphans?
Yeah, it would be a good callback, right?
Yeah, but I mean, just the concept of someone going to Mars, which is actually one of my ideas, but that gives you a good excuse to form an aristocracy or a monarchy, right? Because all these people went to this new place and settled it, and they got to do whatever they wanted. And so, of course, they're going to put themselves in charge and present themselves as better than everyone else. So I think that would be a good vehicle to like deliver that story.
Yeah, definitely. Hopefully we see something like it. It's ripe for the picking. All right, Brian, what's your next alternate opponent faction?
Since we're talking about Mars, I guess I'll skip to that one. So I'm going to call this one the Settlers, Isaac. So this is where a group of colonies decides to leave the Earth sphere and either colonize Mars or the asteroid belt. I like this idea because it's more plausible to me than living around Jupiter. And we have the Jupiter Empire, in the UC, even if maybe people don't know about it because it's manga only for the most part.
Right.
But Jupiter's just so far, Isaac.
Yeah.
It just makes a lot more sense to me to be either at Mars or in the asteroid belt. In the asteroid belt, you have all the asteroids as resources, for metals and things like that. Mars is just so much closer, and there's ice there, which means you could potentially get some water. Plus, Isaac, I really like the dynamic. I don't remember if it was you who told me this or where we were talking about this, but if you get a foothold in the asteroid belt, the Earth sphere can't really threaten you because you basically have unlimited ammo in the form of asteroids that you can just shove their way. That then presents us a different conflict that we've had before, which is a sphere versus sphere conflict. We had that a little bit in Crossbone Gundam, but it was very contained and it was sort of secret.
Yeah.
Right? So here you have Earth versus Mars, which is a little bit of what we had in Iron-Blooded Orphans, but it's not exactly the same thing because Tekkadan was sort of, it's a rogue faction.
The size differences were so massive that it really wasn't so much sphere versus sphere, but like a massive military versus a very small group fighting against them.
Yeah, versus 2 or 3 ships.
Yeah.
So I think what the UC needs, if you're going to go in a new direction, the UC, I think you need a bit of a setting change. And I think Mars or the asteroid belt would do that. I think that would feel a little fresher. You run less of a risk of repeating yourself if you go somewhere completely different.
Yeah, totally. Oh, God. Brian, you have to see The Expanse because I'll spoil things a little bit, but when the asteroids start flying, that's when it becomes very clear that the asteroid belt is very powerful. So.
Oh, I bet. I've heard nothing but good things about The Expanse.
Yeah,
so.
You should. I mean, the series is done, so you should check it out. Anyway.
All right, what's your number 3, Isaac?
All right. So I don't know if our listeners remember this, but we had a bit of a long struggle that was 80 years long called the Cold War. And the enemies were believing an idea that was called communism, and it's one of those ideas where like it kind of sounds good in general, like okay, sure, we should share, and then in practice it's just horrible.
But that's how communism always takes hold, right? Everyone's like, this isn't such a bad idea. Like, I don't get the problem. Like, why does everyone not like it? And then it never works out.
Yeah, and then a few years later, you're like, oh my God, what happened? So.
I regret everything.
Yeah, it's like, you know what? Maybe we shouldn't share everything. Anyways, we have space fascism. Why wouldn't we have space communism? So something like this would, take hold maybe with technology as a route, whether it's, people saying, oh, people should have equal minds and share thoughts. So now we got a bunch of cyborgs running around in this setting or something like that, where they've got, brain implants. And well, what does that translate into in combat? Well, they're able to share like thoughts in combat. So they fight like a swarm of locusts or hornets, they're much more kind of coordinated. And of course, people are going to fight against that because some people, want private thought. They don't want to, be linked into this kind of hive mind system where everyone's equal and, standardize and all that. So I can see how maybe something like this comes about with a colony is maybe isolated or something or short on resources, and they just figure this will be the best way for everybody to survive. But of course, people like freedom and liberty too, and they want to fight for that and oppose this evil faction in some Gundam setting.
Yeah, I like it. I think it could work. I mean, if you got the one colony that's isolated, maybe they all agree to do this thing. And maybe as part of it, they agree to get this neural implant or something, and that's how the hive mind starts and, it goes awry or something like that. So I think it'd be fun. I don't see why not. I mean, we've had more ridiculous things in some series, so yeah, I would give it a shot.
To an extent, I mean, Dogady and Jupiter Empire, right? They were the North Korea of they were space communism. Yeah, they were space communism when it goes so bad, like not even just regular bad.
Yeah, they were already in the oppression phase.
Yeah, and if he had the technology to put brain implants into people, he would have done it, But
absolutely,
resources were tight. And speaking of technology, what I like about your whole settlers faction idea is it has relevance. And by that I mean SpaceX and every country that has a space program wanting to journey to Mars, set up a Mars colony, right? Everybody was talking about a Mars colony, a few years ago, and it's still talked about today and stuff. And people get excited for the Mars probes and rovers and scouting missions and stuff like that. So I guess it's just the logical conclusion of what if the Mars colony that gets sent had like enough of a population to grow and they had mobile suits.
Yeah, I guess I'm a little confused about that in general, Isaac. Like, why hasn't the UC done more with Mars? It seems so logical to me.
Yeah.
I mean, you got Mars Xeon, but no one knows who Mars Xeon is.
Yeah. Let's kind of brainstorm this a little bit right now, Brian. Like, it's not a distance issue because there's a Jupiter energy fleet.
That's right.
And they go way past
fly
Mars.
by all the time.
I don't think it's so much a population issue.
No, that's the whole problem. They got too many people. That's why they're in colonies. So
right. So is it a tech issue? You think, the Earth Federation, for all their massive wealth, they just haven't put any into terraforming technology? That's
a good point. It could be a question of resources and priorities, maybe. I don't think the Earth Federation has any particular need to go to Mars. It also seems like as time goes on, especially, in the Victory-ish era, Federation's not doing too hot, Isaac. I don't think they have the resources to do the terraforming, but that doesn't mean the colonies couldn't band together and go do it, right?
Brian, the colonies can't even stop the Federation by banding together.
That's okay. Yeah, that's fair.
Even when they secretly banded together to give to essentially build the Neo-Zeon fleet, if you remember, in Shard's counterattack, and keep it secret, they still didn't defeat the Federation.
Yeah, that's fair. But I mean, maybe they can't in UC whenever Victory takes place. But I mean, maybe they could in UC 200.
Oh, okay.
It's going to take a while. That's why I think a time skip would be necessary.
Yeah.
Unless you retcon it and say you've been doing it this whole time, but that doesn't seem to be in the cards. So, I mean, maybe there's other Mars stories I'm not aware of. So, listeners, if you're aware of some other UC Mars stories beyond Mars Xeon, that's really all that comes to mind. Or maybe if you're aware of the reason why we don't go to Mars in the UC, I'd be interested to hear it.
I'd even take it a step further and say that it's practicality almost on the part of the Federation. Maybe they looked around at their meeting and they said, look, we have a hard enough time controlling colonies that are within visual distance of the Earth. There's no way we're going to send, millions of people to Mars to be independent and eventually, want to attack us or conquer us or something.
Yeah, that's fair.
So let's nip this in the bud, and we just won't have terraforming technology.
Do you think if they controlled Mars, they'd have to change their name from the Earth Federation to the Sol Federation or something?
Probably, but again, I mean, the moment that ship is launched, I think by default they're not going to be answering to the Federation.
Yeah. Okay.
There's a number of days when a colony ship leaves Earth towards Mars with the purpose of setting up a colony, and they have everything, where they'll no longer think of themselves as Earth. Well, they'll become their own government.
That's a great point, and that actually segues nicely into my next one, which is kind of related to the settlers, but I think this one's a little bit more fun. So this one I call the migrators, and this is where a group of colonies decides to leave the solar system in search of a new home.
Very turn A.
Yeah, so this is a long-term goal, Isaac. And so I was thinking, because this whole thing was we got too many fascists, right? So perhaps instead of people following a charismatic fascist leader, they decided to follow a charismatic futurist leader. Again, this would have to happen at a time when things are looking grim. Maybe there's low resources, they're running out, they're doing the math, and they're like, it's not going to work out for us here. Let's go somewhere else.
Maybe there's a moonlight butterfly attack, and this is really the only option to save your life.
I'm not going to go over there. I'm going to go over here now. So, but the conflict here again would be different. This is not one that we've had before, really, to my knowledge. This would be the Federation is opposing them because let's assume that enough people are in this migration, and it removes too many people from the resource chain, and so it harms everyone else's chance of survival. Because I guess I don't know the truth here, Isaac, but I've always felt that it was a bit of a symbiotic relationship, right? Earth grows food for the colonies, but the colonies also provide all the industry and the manufacturing and stuff.
Do they, Brian?
I think they do to some extent, but I think that's how you'd have to pitch it for this to work. Otherwise, why does the Federation care if they leave, right? So you have to have enough people leave that it somehow hurts the Federation in some way.
Is it during turn A, or at least the centuries before turn A, I should say, was the last Federation government screaming at the sky, "No, don't leave," as the colonies were boosting away.
They might have been screaming at him to take him with them,
Yeah, as things went horrible on Earth.
And so, I think this would be a good, philosophical discussion about the future of humanity. where is that? Is it here or is it somewhere else? Is it multiple places? What does that mean? If you leave and go somewhere else, are you still human? That kind of thing. I think even in one of the Evolve shorts, Isaac Judah from Double Zeta, he leaves the solar system, if I recall, in a Jupiterus with a whole bunch of I think new types on board. They're all in stasis or something. But
to where?
I think he goes to
Alpha Centauri or something like that, or he went to Beetlejuice.
Oh no, it's not in Evolve. I misspoke. Oh yeah, it's in the Victory Gundam side story, which we'll read someday. He leaves the solar system. Spoilers, everyone, for this 30-year-old side story manga that you're never going to read. But he leaves the solar system in an interstellar spaceship to Proxima Centauri, which would be colonized in UC 653.
Wow, man, that's a commitment to get on the ship, and you'll wake up hundreds of years later in some other world. Okay.
Yeah, so I like that idea. I'm thinking just do it on a bigger scale instead of one colony. A lot of the colonies are like, I've had it. I'm out of here. We're all going this way. They just flip the bird to the Federation, and the Federation wakes up one day and half the colonies have gone. And they're like, where'd you guys go? What's the deal? So they chase after them, and yeah.
Two things on Judah's colony ship. Just because they're leaving during, the second Neo-Zeon War, or technically the first, I don't know. I can guarantee, by default, they've brought space fascism with them. It's like someone's going to get out of their pod, and a couple of years are going to go by. Maybe they're going to have some ups and downs, and one person's going to get up on a soapbox and say, we should have space fascism.
Well, I guess they weren't leaving in the Neo-Zeon War. They were leaving in, I guess, the Zanscare War, but that doesn't mean there would still be space fascists on board for the same exact reasons. So.
Probably, or somebody who they all know it, and then they'll come to some challenge as a society on a new world, and some idiot will get on a box and say, "Why don't we try space fascism?" And half the people will say, "Yeah, that's a good idea," and the other half will roll their eyes and go, "Oh God, here we go again."
Judah was like, I can't believe I flew all the way out here.
Everybody pack your bags. We're going back.
Yeah, just cancel the trip.
Okay, my second thought is, this is the perfect side story / sequel to Turn A, because you just do the story about the colony ships leaving, their journey, and of course, since they didn't get butterflied, they know exactly how to build mobile suits and a Gundam, I assume, or their attempt to build a Gundam,
Absolutely. I think it's a gap, and I think there should be a story about it someday.
God, it'd be so cool too, because you'd have maybe people vaguely remembering Earth, and Earth becomes a religion or some vague idea they all have, oh yeah, well, my great grandparents used to tell me about Earth, something like that, and wow, that'd be so cool.
I like this kind of story because it's far enough in the future because I feel like, right now we're in this sort of UC Next 100 phase, and I think that's pretty good for the first half of UC 100. We have Hathaway's Flash, and we have some of the F90 stories, which are fine. We got Crossbone, which I generally like. We haven't read the later Crossbones, which I understand are a little bit crazier. But watching Victory, it's kind of where do you go from here, man? It's a weird time right there. So I feel like you need a time skip a little bit to reset things.
Yeah, and what better way to do that than hundreds of centuries?
Get out of town for a few hundred years and then come back. So
okay, so next on my list is, it's still kind of under the umbrella of a group of a religious faction with mobile suits, but this one would be a bit more specific in their beliefs. I kind of thought, well, what would be kind of something they believe in if it wasn't just new type worship, and I put colony dropism / soulism. Which, if you remember, as we've heard many times, Brian, some people, I guess it started, Xeon planted these little breadcrumbs, but some people think people on Earth have souls that are weighed down by Earth's gravity, which is insane. Or Haman's opinion is the stupidest thing she's ever heard. But let's say, people in our world believe crazy things. Let's say people kept on believing in that, but in the millions. Okay, so assume these are space noids, right? Because of course their souls aren't weighed down by Earth's gravity.
Right.
This would mean that this group of space noids, all they want to do are drop operations. All they care about are just anything that would destroy people who have souls way down by Earth's gravity. They ultimately probably want to destroy the Earth itself, since, it has such large mass. It makes gravity. So, yeah, these are just genocidal, terrible people that are essentially bigots. They think people that look like them are different when it's just in their heads. They're just out of their mind. Maybe they even think they're saving people's souls by destroying them.
Oh, that's a very,
We're freeing them from Earth's gravity. I imagine their plan eventually is to attack all the other spheres in the solar system, and just, we don't need spheres. We have colonies. Why do we need gravity? It weighs down your soul, Brian.
I think that if this cult gained enough followers, it would anger and make Haman roll in her grave so much that her new type of spirit would come back to life to try to kill these people.
Whether this takes place in a non-UC series or UC series, it'd be...
she'd still make the jump. She'd still be so upset that she'd cross universes.
Yeah, just like we saw like the General Rebel as a ship, I think we should have like a ship called like the Haman Karn or something,
Oh yeah. It'd be shaped like a Kubile head or something like that.
Yeah, and it's on the faction that clearly thinks this belief is nonsense. Like, maybe, I don't know whether they believe in souls or not. They're like, if souls do exist, they're definitely not weighed down by something like gravity. So that's something fun. I think it's clearly a belief in Gundam. So why wouldn't it become a large religious movement that becomes very militant and aggressive? And something I think a lot of viewers would be like, we're sick of religious fundamentalism in our world. We've had enough of it. It causes us nothing but problems. Let's stop it. Let's fight against it. Freedom for everybody, not religious control.
Yeah, it's also one of those things that within the universe, it's not that hard to pitch, right? Especially to maybe some disgruntled space noids.
They're all disgruntled.
Yeah, that's fair. You could easily pitch to them that the Federation and the Earth is the root of all their problems. You make a few more metaphysical leaps, and here you are to Soulism.
Brian, I sometimes get so bored of like space fascism. I'm looking forward to Zeta, where I can go Earth fascism.
Yeah, it's just a different flavor of fascism, but it's at least it's a slightly different flavor, right?
Right, yeah. And we live on Earth, so we can relate. All right, Brian, what's your next faction?
So interesting you bring up the Titans, Isaac. Ooh. So
Titans.
the Titans, yes.
In his defense, he's like, Shah grew up in space, so maybe it's like a word that they didn't use that often. I don't know.
I actually don't remember what the conclusion on that was. I mean, I remember reading about that a long time ago. I'm sure there's a more up-to-date discussion on it. But I think it was just, that's how it was pronounced back then. And I'm sure they meant Titans, but I think they took it a little literally and they said Titans. But if anyone knows what we're talking about, feel free to leave us a comment. So I'm calling this one, Isaac, the Rebel. I think this is a story that's missing from the Universal Century. Listeners, if you are not aware of the ending of Hathaway's Flash, please skip the next 5 minutes because I'm going to spoil it.
Oh, no.
A final warning. So, and I think a perfect person to be this rebel would be Bright Noah.
Wow.
I think what's missing from the UC, Isaac, is maybe there's some side stories I'm not aware of, but, the Federation has always been better than the alternative a little bit, or less bad, or less morally bankrupt. But could there be a figure in the Federation that rebels to the extent that you believe enough in the Rebels' cause to cheer for the Rebel over the Federation? Can you get pro-Federation viewers to root for a new Federation faction that started from within the Federation?
Wow.
So after Hathaway's Flash, Isaac, Mr. Noah, what do you always call him? The big brother of the White Base crew?
Was it Team Dad, Team Big Brother?
Yeah, Team Dad.
He starts out as Team Big Brother, and then he becomes Team Dad,
Yeah, so our favorite Team Dad of the last 30 years, he's not in a good headspace.
To say the least. That's putting it lightly.
Yeah. I don't think he has a whole lot left to really keep going. So I think there could be, again, I'm not saying it has to be Bright. I'm just saying you need a charismatic figure enough in the Federation that could start a rebellion to try to clean it up. So what if he just snaps and uses all of his clout and tries a coup against the Federation?
Wow.
Would it work? I don't know. The teams that he surrounds himself with, largely Londo Bell, always seems to be the most competent of the Federation, right?
Yeah.
I think he could at least stir up enough people, certainly more than Mafty, to make a good run at it. And I think it could easily, I mean, you'd have to retcon some stuff here, but you could easily take place in the UC 110s before F91, which is a relatively quiet period outside of the fastest formula manga. To me, it seems like a natural progression. You either have him basically just retire and we never see him again, or you have him snap. And this could be that snap story. So again, it doesn't have to be Bright, but I think that it could be an interesting story. This is sort of like the opposite of the Titans, right? The Titans were like the Federation goes even worse.
Yeah.
But like, what if someone in the Federation tried to go better, tried to go good, and they did it in a coup fashion, which you could argue maybe that's bad already, but
that's part of the story.
I don't think we have that, right? Because you don't like the Titans, right? They're the bad guys, but but Bright, he's the good guy. So then, do you choose Bright? Like, who do you choose, Bright or the Federation? I think that could be interesting.
God, that's so brilliant, Brian. A Federation civil war. Do you envision that, like, having not a single mono-eye? We just see, like, painted GMs fighting, Federation color GMs? Or with the colonies, some of them would go pro-Federation and other ones would go coup?
Yeah, I think you'd have a mix for sure, and I'm
Okay.
sure you could get some mono eyes in there. Depends what kind of deals Mr.
Yeah.
Bright's willing to strike, right? So
Wow. But that's so. Oh, this is such a great idea, Brian. I'd love to see a series like this. Can you imagine it, Brian? Like,
I think it'd be fun.
some colonies siding with the coup, so they send out mono eyes, but they're in Londo Bell colors. Wow.
And look at that. Yeah, I didn't even spoil the movie that bad. So,
No.
all right, listeners, you can resume listening. But so I think that'd be fun. I don't, to my knowledge, I don't think we have that type of story. Again, maybe there's something like that
Yeah.
in a manga I haven't read, but we don't have that on on the animated scale,
No.
right, where everyone knows about it.
You know what I envision? Like, if that series was done and how it ended, I can see probably there's going to be a few super weapons, of course.
Yeah.
I can see there being so much damage in this civil war that Bright takes maybe the honorable way and decides to end the coup attempt because of how many people have died and how much devastation it's
Yeah,
caused.
that's fair. That'd probably be the easiest way, right, to get him to surrender.
Yeah, even if he was close to victory, or it seemed pretty obvious he was going to eventually win, he would probably say enough people are going to die. If the coup does win, it's going to be a military government, and that's not really for the people.
And maybe that's the end of the story. He broadcasts the conflict, and then the perpetrators are arrested, even if he dies, right? So maybe he succeeds in death.
But the Federation will still be in power, so nothing will have changed.
Well, as I'm saying, he'd have to make it public what they did, or to some extent, to then have a bigger uprising against them. But
What they did, I mean, they've done what they always do.
well, yeah, I mean that's fair.
The government's always been incompetent and corrupt.
Yeah, I don't know what the ending is, but you get it.
Okay.
I mean, it's a different type of conflict than we've had before, so I think it could be interesting. Again, it doesn't have to be Bright.
Yeah, it could iron-blooded orphans end.
Yeah.
The situation's so bad at the end of the Civil War that, the Federation announces its dissolution and reforms as the Earth Republic or something. There you go.
Yeah, they could also just clean house, and that could answer why they're just so damn ineffective the rest of the century.
Yeah.
Maybe everyone who replaced the other guys, they're just too passive, whereas the other guys maybe were too ruthless. I guess at least they got stuff done, right?
Yeah.
In F91, and especially in Victory, the Federation is pretty pathetic.
Those families that always seem to be super powerful behind the scenes. This Civil War washes them away. And, the series ends with us actually, discussing elections and stuff like that, which you never hear in Gundam.
Yeah, a little more democratic. Yeah, maybe that's the ending,
God, that's so great. That's such a great dream scenario. Oh, my God.
I'm a little shocked Tomino never wrote something like that. I mean, maybe he was just too sick of the UC after that and didn't really want to go back to that time period. But it seems like a logical next step, or at least a potential next step.
I guess from a point of view of the group's conflict, that is the Federation Civil War.
A little bit, yeah. I guess you can count the AU sort of as the...
They're the good faction, yeah. I see what you mean, but this is much more strictly Federation military. Not everybody invited to the party.
No, there's no Xeon, yeah.
Yeah, would make this setting so unique that there's no Xeon. Maybe there's Xeon veterans that decide to kind of join in and throw their lot in with the coup.
Yeah.
Because this is the next best thing. This is the only train that we can catch.
This guy's beat us like 8 times. We might as well join him now that he's sort of fighting on our side.
Yeah, pretty much. Like, if there's any chance for the Space Noids to kind of win, we ironically have to do it by joining the Federation military that's fighting the rest of the Federation.
Do you have any more, Isaac? I got one more.
Oh, no, that was it for me. I just had the religious faction, the monarchy, and then a much more specific religious belief. But what's your final one?
All right, my final one is, I call this the engineers, Isaac. So this is basically, what if the engineers got mad and did a coup? What if Anaheim / SNRI / whatever engineer organization of your choosing initiated a coup attempt against the Federation? So perhaps they were fed up with the Federation, the Titan, Xeon, whoever, using their creations in a way they weren't intended. They set out to create a new generation of Gundams more powerful than the last that cannot be stood up to. And, they would know because they create all the mass-produced suits. So this would be more plausible the later time moves on as the Federation becomes more and more complacent and out of date.
Mm-hmm.
In Victory, for example, the Federation suits are pretty outdated and they are very, very vulnerable. So, but imagine if in that scenario, the next Psy Gundam or the Penelope emerged, the next version of those, emerged on the battlefield with no equal, sort of on other side. They could do a lot of damage with only a few suits. I'm not saying they would take over the world, but it would make for an interesting 13-episode side story or something. So
yeah,
maybe a good match at least. They can make a good run at it. It just takes a dedicated team at Anaheim or SNRI or whoever you want. While they've really pulled the strings and played both sides, like they've never launched their own attack, to my knowledge. So
yeah, do you envision them like just saying, okay, we're going to take over everything, or do they have a much more specific goal as like the villains?
I think they would have. I don't think they have enough people to take over everything, so they'd probably have to have a more specific goal. Like they'd have to, topple the Federation leaders. It's whatever that time period's equivalent of, destroying Jabro is.
I see. Okay, this is pretty cool. This is very cyberpunk. It's like the Megacorp, right? Because the Megacorps always have their own standing armies. They're that big and wealthy.
Yeah.
So why wouldn't they become their own faction? The Witch from Mercury, from what I gleaned from our little prologue episode, it sounds like that's essentially what Cathedral is, or Cathedral's the arm of a corporation, right?
Yeah, I mean, they're supposed to be a corporation. I mean, everyone listening to this probably watched the show, so we're probably not making sense now. But the show was pitched that it would have more corporations than I think we've seen, maybe other than in Iron-Blooded Orphans. But
yeah, and to an extent, Rockefeller was just a big corporation.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, this would be pretty cool.
Yeah, mentioning Rockefeller, actually, so the one step further than this, Isaac, of like, how could they take over everyone? Well, they don't have enough people, but they could make enough mobile suits because maybe they just pretend that they made them for the Federation, and maybe it's far enough in the future, they flip on the AI switch, don't need a pilot anymore. Now the Federation is really screwed.
Yeah.
So it's like it's a more advanced scenario of the mobile dolls from Wing, which we already talked about how great that was, and how if you redid it today, that would become probably the focus of the show. So it's a little bit closer to the machines example from Iron-Blooded Orphans, but you have, in this instance, you have some humans controlling them. So
yeah,
that could be the great equalizer,
The return to the mobile dolls. Yeah, they're pretty much trade federationing it, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
They're Clone Warsing it. Where, well, we will never have the same manpower since we're just a business, but we can absolutely produce robots to fight for us.
Oh boy! All right, I don't know how I'm going to cut that one, listeners, but we're going to segue back. There's a whole part I just had to cut out about goblins and Star Wars. Anyway,
you know what? Voldemort will come back. We have a time turner. Don't you believe he's dead?
So yeah, that's my Anaheim engineer idea. I just thought, Isaac, we never really seen them outright attack someone.
You know what your little Megacorp faction reminds me of a little bit is in Gihren's Greed, like the alternate route where Tem Ray and the scientists. Well, I don't think they intended they didn't intend the AI to go rogue, but I mean, for a while, I guess, maybe even minutes or days or hours, however long it took for the AI to go sentient, they were just a corporation that was able to beat anybody. And then the AI said, I'm in charge. And then things went horrible.
I mean, that brings up another question, Isaac, which is kind of on this topic. Why haven't we ever just seen like a Gihren's Greed OVA, where they just kind of animate alternate scenarios? I think that'd be fun.
Yeah, that would, although that torpedoes Chrono Gundam, but it's
exactly.
It's the same effect because Gihren's Greed was so cool because it had, depending on what happens in Gihren's Greed, there's like so many Xeon factions, right? There's Reborn Xeon, I think True Xeon, and then Legitimate Xeon.
maybe, I mean, okay, I guess I'm being unrealistic asking for an OVA. They're never going to spend money on that.
No.
But out of all the times, Isaac, they repackaged the damn show as a manga. They've never repackaged Gurren's Greed as a manga, I don't think. Why haven't we had a manga where every chapter is an alternate scenario? Like that'd be fun to consume, right? Because then you don't have to play the game. It's a lot more accessible.
Definitely, yeah. But we won't get it because it's an old game and no one's going to turn it into English. And yeah, here we are.
Yeah, here we are. You know what else we're not going to get, Isaac? Goddamn Calamity War OVA.
No, well, that's more likely than Gurren's Greed coming to English.
Oh, that's fair. Yeah. Okay.
I mean, why wouldn't we see the origins of Barbados?
I want it yesterday. All right, listeners, if you have any thoughts about alternatives to space fascism for our antagonists, we would love to hear them. What do you think of our ideas? Are you going to go convert to Isaac's religious new type cult? Do you believe that Earth's people's souls are weighed down by Earth's gravity?
Do you want to become a king of Mars and lead, have your nobles in noble armors and leading a bunch of peasants in mobile suits against the Earth Federation?
Or are you like Judah and you just want to leave? And I mean, like, go real far away.
Or do you want to see like a big megacorp try to take on the Federation and, I don't know, and end all taxes, end every business tax, and income taxes, no more zoning laws,
and space tax. Yeah. So that's your task, listeners. Sunrise comes to you and says, we need a new antagonist, and it can't be a space fascist. Do you go in, or do you take your chips and go home? So let us know your thoughts.
Right. You have to have an idea. Come on. As great as Xeon is, and I'm a Xeon fan, we got to see stuff that's different. There's got to be different enemies to fight in this anime series. It can't be the same group, even if they have like a facelift and it goes Zanskare,
It starts with a Z, Isaac. It's you're halfway there.
Yeah, I can't stand that. Why didn't they call it something else? Like, I don't know. Name it after the queen.
It's a cool word. It just so happens to start with a Z.
I don't think it's that's cool. They put the words. They're like, okay, Z is the evil letter and scare because people get scared of. Guillotines and the forces of evil fascism.
So it goes.
It's such a low-hanging fruit, yeah. It's the same way that, like, Crossbone Vanguard, like, of course they're pirates. You put Crossbone in their name.
Gotta be pirates, man.
You guys are way too literal.
I think that was a little bit of a preview of the victory review coming up probably in the next month or so. But, all right, listeners, so let us know your thoughts. And, again, hope you all have a good start to your 2023. Isaac, take us away.
All right, listeners, before you go sleep tonight, stand next to your bed, put your hands together, get on your knees, look up at the ceiling, and hail the new type cult.
Good night, everybody.